Welcome back to Tales Arcane, where we talk about D&D, TTRPGs, and fantasy storytelling. In a recent video, I talked about how you can break down your D&D campaign into a series of more manageable mini-campaigns, usually spanning 3 to 4 sessions and focusing on a single adventure. Now, in the aftermath of that video, a few people wanted to know how I go about structuring those mini-campaigns, how I structure those D&D adventures. So that's what we're talking about in today's video. I have covered this before, but it was quite a long time ago. I use a 5-step template to structure my mini campaigns, my mini arcs. And so in this video, I'm going to take you through the 5 steps of that template and show you how you can apply that to your own games. As always, I want to quickly mention that everything I do here on the channel is made possible by the wonderful people who back me over on Patreon. If you join the Tales Arcane Patreon, you can get access to more than 1,000 pages of my own homebrew D&D content. It includes encounters, adventures, campaign settings, GM resources, and access to the Tales Arcane Patreon-only Discord. If you want to join the Patreon, you can head to a link below this video, or if you want to just stay here and support me on YouTube, liking and subbing to the channel is greatly appreciated. Now, let's talk about that 5-step template for structuring your D&D adventures. When I talk about a campaign arc, or a mini-campaign, I basically mean a D&D adventure that has a setup, a bit of progress throughout the middle, and then a challenge that is overcome at the end. There's usually one core villain that the players are focusing on, and even if the players never go on to complete the campaign as a whole, if they complete that arc, they will get a sense of resolution at the end. And then towards the end of the arc, you're usually placing some small foreshadowing elements to hint at what the next arc is going to be. I should also point out here that we're not planning a railroad. A railroad is where you force your players to go down a certain path regardless of their choices. When you're planning a campaign arc, that's not what you're doing. You're just working out roughly what you think will happen if the players are trying to overcome a certain goal, and you're going to set that goal up at the start, but you're then going to let your players do whatever they want to try and achieve that goal. If the players are trying to solve a murder, it's not railroading to know who the murderer is and to know what clues might be out there for the players to find. And we're not going to force the players to find the clues in a certain order. We're just going to give the players a goal and then apply this template to give the whole thing a little bit of structure. Now, as I said before, there are 5 steps in this template. Steps 1 and 2 cover the first session, 3 and 4 cover the second session, and 5 is usually the final session. Now, this is a very loose template. You could apply this across 10 sessions. You could apply this across an entire campaign, theoretically. But for the purposes of planning a shorter arc, we're going to imagine this playing out across 3 sessions. Step 1 is the call to adventure. This is where we want to establish what the player's primary objective is and what is at stake here. Why do the players want to do this? What will they get if they succeed, and what will happen if they fail? One of the simplest ways to do this step is to simply have the players come into contact with the quest giver. So the players perhaps arrive in a new town, and they arrive looking like adventurers with their weapons and their road dust, and soon the local mayor seeks them out and says, hey, none of our local people have got the skills or the desire to go and deal with this problem, but we've got a dragon up in the mountains. Can you go and deal with the dragon? If you don't, it's likely that the dragon is going to swoop down here and destroy the town, as he attempts to do once every 100 years, and we're almost at the 100-year anniversary. And also, if you succeed in slaying or driving this dragon off, then we're going to give you X amount of gold, or perhaps even you get access to the dragon's hoard. So very quickly we establish that the goal is to kill a dragon. We establish that what is at stake is the town. The town will be destroyed if the players fail, and what's also at stake is that if the players succeed in slaying the dragon, they're going to get access to the dragon's hoard, a great mound of gold buried in the mountains. Very clear what the players have to do now. You could do this with a little bit more subtlety. Perhaps the players arrive to find a furious argument going on in the center of the town between those who think everyone should flee the town before the dragon attack and those who say that they should stay and defend their home against inevitable destruction. The players arrive and are almost sort of called in to mediate as outside observers, and at that point they say, well, maybe there's a middle way, and that middle way is us going and defeating the dragon. The sooner you have all of this established, what you're trying to do, what happens if you fail, what happens if you succeed, the sooner the players start to get invested. They get a clear sense of what they need to do, and they start taking actions that move them towards it. One of the worst things that can happen in the early parts of an arc is a lack of clarity around what the players are meant to be doing. Unless you're running something that's a very low stakes, kind of chilled out campaign, you want the players to quickly get a sense of mission, because if they don't have that, they'll just start wandering around and losing energy and momentum. So we established this probably all within the first hour of your first session in the mini campaign. Now we come to step 2, and step 2 is going to cover the rest of our first session. Step 2 is the challenge that must be overcome to get to the main challenge. So the main challenge is go and fight a dragon, but the challenge that must be overcome could be, for example, the journey to the dragon's lair. So perhaps the dragon is high in a dangerous mountainous region, and so the players are going to have to make a perilous journey up to the dragon's lair. And as they do that, they're going to encounter some minor threats along the way. So for example, maybe the players have to climb a very steep cliff to get up to the dragon's lair, and as they're doing that, some small flying monsters, perhaps even a wyvern that's been skulking around the area, comes flying down and starts trying to attack them. And now there's a smaller challenge before they even get to the main challenge that they have to overcome along the way, and that will essentially beef out the rest of that first session. To further illustrate this step, imagine we're doing something that's more like an investigation. The players have to solve a murder. Well, the first challenge might be finding a key witness. That key witness is going to lead them to some other clues that eventually lead them to the murderer, but first they have to find that witness. They know that perhaps the murder was witnessed by someone with flaming red hair and a distinctive green cloak. You can tell I've been reading the Name of the Wind recently. As the players have this information, their first goal is to find that person, and so they maybe have to do a lot of role play, walking up to people in taverns, asking around. Maybe people are scared to talk about this because they're worried that the murderer might target them too if they hear that they've been talking to the investigators. There's just an initial challenge, maybe a role play challenge, maybe a combat challenge, or an environmental challenge that has to be overcome before we get to the meat of this story. By the end of that first session, the players are probably about halfway through, or maybe even close to completing the challenge that stands between them and the main challenge, which brings us on to our second session and the third step of the template. Now, depending on how long the players take to get through step 2, that initial challenge to reach the main challenge, the second session might be taken up with quite a lot of that, because that bit usually takes longer than expected. But towards the midpoint or the end of the second session, we're going to be getting towards that main challenge. The players will have got through the wilderness and they're getting close to the dragon's lair, or the players have found all the clues they need and they're closing in on the murderer, so on. At this point, we're going to move towards step 3, and step 3 is a larger combat encounter or challenge that needs to be overcome that to the players will feel pretty much like the climax of this quest they've been on. It's potentially not the climax, but they initially think it is. In our dragon adventure, the players maybe enter the dragon's lair. They find it to be an old abandoned dwarven fortress filled with undead dwarves and maybe some kobolds who have come in service of this dragon, but they fight their way through and they get to the dragon and they say, this is the main challenge, let's go. They take on the dragon in a deadly combat encounter. And maybe they even manage to defeat the dragon, and the dragon dies. At this point, they feel that they've completed the task. But as step 3, which is that sort of what feels like an ultimate combat encounter or an ultimate overcoming of the challenge, as that starts to come to a close, we reveal step 4. The fourth step is the twist. It's the moment where something is revealed that the players didn't previously know that somehow recontextualizes what came before, or adds an extra step that the players didn't anticipate. The red dragon is slain, it crashes to the ground, but at the same moment, a guttural roar echoes up from a chamber deep below. Turns out that the red dragon was in fact a dracolich, and its phylactery was, a few floors below in another room with a larger dead dragon, and so its soul immediately is transported down to the gemstone in the chamber below, into the skeleton of this huge dragon, and the players watch through the windows of the castle that they're in as this enormous undead dragon flies up into the air, lets out a hideous roar and goes swooping down towards the town from which they came. They now realise that there's an even bigger threat that has to be contended with, an undead dragon which is now on its way to destroy the town. Alternatively, in our murder mystery investigation, the players find and defeat the murderer, but then when they search through his possessions, they find that he was working for someone else. There's actually a cult in the town, and the murderer was carrying out murders based on the ritual specifications of this cult. The players start looking into it, and they quickly realize that the cult is comprised of the various powerful local officials that they've been perhaps coming across and who haven't been too helpful during the course of the investigation. They perhaps put that down to just local officials not wanting to be involved in some kind of bad publicity, but now they realize that there was this sinister cult going on behind the scenes the whole time, and now they have to rush to the cult's meeting to defeat the real villains of the campaign. Or, just to give you a third option, the players finally defeat the bandits that have been terrorizing the area, only to notice that the bandits have a lot of really high quality weaponry that seems to have been given to them by a wealthy benefactor, and they find out that there's a local nobleman who has actually been trying to destabilize the region as the basis for a coup, and has been funding various local groups to cause trouble. So now the players can go and take on that nobleman as a final boss. The point is just to make sure that whatever the players get at the start doesn't have to be the whole story. There's some information that's held back from them. The point here is not to show your players how clever you are as the DM. It's not to have a gotcha moment. It's to make sure that although the players got all the information they needed to understand the goals and the stakes at the start, everything isn't predictable from then on out. If there was no fourth step, if there was no twist that leads to the fifth step of the final challenge, then the players would basically be able to predict everything from the start. Oh, we need to go and kill a red dragon? Well, this adventure ends with us killing a red dragon. Boom. But no, the adventure ends with the players back in the town trying to defeat a huge Draco-Lich, while also maybe evacuating people while trying to hold off this monster. That's just something a little bit more unexpected. Or the players thought they were going to end up confronting a single murderer. Well, now they're in an underground temple under the mayor's house defeating a gang of high-ranking cultists. It's something that was unexpected. Now let's bring this all together. In step 1, the players receive a clear goal and a clear understanding of what happens if they succeed and what happens if they fail. They don't have to wander around in the dark not knowing what they're meant to be doing. Step 2, there's a challenge that needs to be overcome before they can get to the main event of the quest. They have to go on a journey, overcome some minor challenges through roleplay, environmental threats, or smaller monsters before they can get to the main threat of the main antagonist. They then go to step 3, which is the challenge they were kind of always expecting. Fighting the dragon, fighting the murderer, overcoming whatever that challenge was that was set at the start. But then step 4 brings in a new mystery, a new element they didn't see coming. Now they realize that there's a bigger villain to fight, or another disaster to avert, or another item they have to go and get. There's always just some extra bit that they didn't get right from the start. And that brings us to step 5, which is the final challenge. And when they complete that, the campaign comes to an end, and we set up the next campaign arc, and the story continues. If you're worried that using this kind of template will make your adventures feel too formulaic and predictable, there's 2 things to remember. Thing number 1 is that when you plug different elements into each step of the 5-step template, you're going to get very different outcomes. If the twist on one occasion is that the boss is a final form, just leading to an even more intense battle in step 5, that's going to feel very different to the twist being that the players find out there's some even greater reward they have to go after, and they have to go to some entirely different location and fight an entirely new boss to get that reward. The players aren't going to look at those 2 events and think, oh, that was essentially the same story beats playing out. The other thing to remember is that when your players get involved in the adventure you've planned, all your plans will go out the window. Everything will feel different because the players are pushing buttons you didn't expect to be pushed. They're going to places in an order you didn't expect. And that original template is going to start getting all mushed up. And that's a good thing because, again, it's going to make the whole adventure feel more unique. Imagine the players decide to take an unusual route to explore the dragon's lair before going up and fighting the dragon, and they come across that Draco-Lich skeleton down deep below next to the huge glowing phylactery crystal. They're going to realize they're dealing with a Draco-Lich, so maybe they destroy the crystal first, and then they go up and fight the dragon in the chamber above. So now things are playing out in a very different order. The point is you start with a template that generates all of the events you think will happen, and then you put your players in there and you watch all hell break loose, and that is, you know, a good outcome. So don't worry too much about things feeling stale or formulaic. That is the video. I hope that helped you. I hope this template can be applied to your own games and your own creative process. Over time, you'll probably use the template less and less, or you'll bend and twist it so much it kind of becomes your own template. But the point is just to have a basic structure to start with when you're feeling overwhelmed about how to approach your preparations. And pretty soon you'll be able to not even think about this, just intuitively think what beat comes next in the story, maybe a plot twist here, maybe a payoff there. It will just start being second nature to you. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying everything everything we're doing here on the channel, and if you get a chance, like, subscribe, back me on Patreon, all that good stuff. I'll see you in the next video.